In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a rotating cube in 3D space. We're going to create something that looks like this. Let's begin by creating the cube itself. I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to make this 300 by 300. We'll have to uncheck lock aspect ratio. And let's call this pink cube. I'll call it pink cube 2 since I've already created one pink cube. And 3 seconds should be okay. I'll say all right. Now let's create a new solid. Command Y. Select the color. I'm going with the hot pink. And let's make it comp size and say OK. Now we're going to duplicate this 3 times so that we have our 4 sides of the cube. And let's make all of them 3D by clicking in the column right below the cube in the timeline. Now let's look at 2 views. This one is active camera. This one is looking at the top. Straight down on the cube. And so we're going to put one of the solids on each side flush with the edge of the composition. Because the composition is 300 by 300, in this case, we can move it on Z minus 150. And that should align it right with that edge. It appears to be larger on this one because this is the active camera and it has come closer to the camera. Let's take this one and go 150. So the first one, a negative number brings you closer to the camera and a positive number takes you farther away from the camera. Now let's select both of these and rotate them 90 degrees on the green axis, so RGB, that's X, Y, Z. So that would be on the Y axis, we're going to rotate them 90 degrees. Okay, now we have to be careful on this one because the arrow is blue, which would indicate that we're moving in Z, but in this case, since we've rotated it, that is not the case. We're actually going to be moving in X. So we're at 150 now on X, so we should be able to go to 0 and 300. Okay, now we've got our cube. I'll just put that in my pre-comps folders. And let's create a new composition. Now I'm going to go back to our HD presets. 1920 by 1080. I will lock the aspect ratio and say OK. Go to one view for right now. I'm going to drop the cube into the timeline, which will put the cube right in the center of my composition, rather than dragging it into the composition window. Now let's create our floor plane. Command Y for another solid. Find a color that you like. I'm going to do a medium color because we're going to be creating cast shadow, so I want it to not be too dark. And I'll say OK to that. Now it doesn't matter. We can make it comp size. That will be fine. Now we have to make it 3D. We also have to make our pink cube 3D. And in the second column, click there. That will make the 3D cube behave properly in this composition. I'm going to move the new solid below the pink cube, and then I'm going to rotate it. Now in this case, we are going to rotate around R, so that's RGB. We can make this 90. And now I'm going to go back into my 2 view. I want to view this one from the side, either the left or the right side, and then I'm going to drag I'm going to call this floor, I'll rename it. This will be my floor. I'm going to drag it down so it's right even with the bottom of the cube. And as I said, let's rename this one floor. Now let's go ahead and add a camera. I'll just use our default settings here. I'm going to zoom out a little ways and change this view to top. Now I'm going to change the camera's position a little bit. I want to raise the camera up. If we move the camera's position in the timeline, the point of interest is going to stay locked. So in this case, it's locked on our cube, which is right in the center of our universe. So I'll just move this down a little bit so that we can see the floor. Now I'm actually going to use a null object to control the camera. I'll rename this one Cam Control. It needs to be 3D, and the camera will become a child of that null object. And now we can rotate on the green axis, around the green axis, so that's XY, so that'll be the Y, and you can see what happens as we rotate the camera. So at the beginning, I'm going to set a keyframe for 0, and then I'll move out, say, let's say 2 seconds, and rotate it 1, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that's fine. Maybe I'll shorten the work area a little bit. Now we have to add lights in order to enhance the illusion of 3D. I'm going to begin by adding a spotlight. So under Layer, New Light, Spotlight. I'm going to make the intensity 100 and say OK. Now there are a few things we have to do in order to create shadows. First of all, I'm going to go into the Spotlight's light options and make sure that I have cast shadows on. And then I have to go into the floor, material options, close this up, and make sure that it casts shadows. This isn't so important because the floor is not really going to be casting a shadow, but we'll just say OK, and then accept shadows, that's on. OK, that's good. Now we have to move the light, the angle of the light. So I'm going to move the light up just by moving on Y, and then I can drag here. This is the angle. So I think I'll move this over here and then have my light face that way. So let's see what happens. All right, now let's go into our cube, and under the material options for each one of these, I'll close them all up and select them all, and then open them up, and I can go into material options. Cast shadows, I want cast shadows to be on. Accept shadows is on by default. So that should be OK. Then we can go back to our comp. We now have something that looks like this. Pretty dark overall, so I'm going to add another light. This one's just going to be an ambient light. And I'm probably not going to have this one at 100%. I'll start out with this at 50, ambient. Now the ambient light is just going to give an overall light. It does not have a direction. It's not like a light source with a direction. It just illuminates the scene overall. So that helps a lot. Now I would like to have a light maybe on this side to give a little bit of definition to these back walls of our cube to make it feel more dimensional. So I'm going to add another spotlight on this side, but I won't make it so bright. I'll make it as a secondary light. So I'll leave it at 50 for now and then see what happens. Now I can look at the top view and see where my light is. This one is the camera. I want this light to be around on this side, so I could just go straight over and then swing this around and then just adjust it so I can get it where I want it. Maybe over here a little bit and then swing this over here. Okay, so now we have a basic cube in 3D. In the next video, I'll show you how you can add type to the individual surfaces of the cube.